Good evening, everyone. This is our 16th episode of our WVDA Homesteading Series. Tonight, we are joined with video by Dave Elliot of Blue Mountain Farm and our very own Zach Perry, horticulturalist for the WVDA and NRCS. So, we're going to start off this series on cold crops with a few rundown of our programs here at the Department of Agriculture, and then we'll hop in and watch Dave's video on low tunnels, and then we'll hop over to Zach to do some cold crops. So with that, let me share my screen here. See that okay, everyone? Okay. And so I think we went through this a little bit. We'll go over our business development team, and then we'll get to Dave, and then with Zach, and we'll round up with any questions that anyone may have. This is our West Virginia Grown program. It's West Virginia's premier branding program. Got a new directory coming out that should be released soon. We got to, we got to see a little bit about the preview of it not too long ago, and it looks extremely well. So any contact information, that questions you may have, are West Virginia Grown, WV Grown at WVDA.us is down here in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. This is our Veterans and Heroes to Agriculture program. Contact information down here in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. You can email to vets2ag@wvda.us or go to our website to garner information about our Veterans and Heroes to Agriculture program here at the department. Planning coordinators, which is my position here in the Eastern Panhandle in the blue. Got Kacey Gantzer in the Northern Panhandle in the orange. On the left, down here in the southwestern part of the state, we've got Lacey Davidson. And in the southeastern part of the state, we have Ashley Amos. And our emails are there in the slideshow presentation, but we will also drop those into the chat box if you guys don't mind doing that. And I will try to do that as soon as we get done here going through these as well. So with that, we will hop right in to Dave Elliot and Blue Mountain Farm.
My name is Dave Elliot, and this is Blue Mountain Farm in Hedgesville. We're a small-scale operation here. We have 11 total acres, and we cultivate probably 4 to 5, sometimes 6 or 7, but usually 4 or 5 acres. The ground is very fertile, but it's broken up into very small individual little pieces here and there because we're in a bowl and we've got a creek that runs the entire length and it meanders. So it chops everything up into small pieces. That's one of the reasons why we're going to no-till, is it's hard to use big equipment in here. It's even hard to use a BCS rototiller. It's hard to turn the thing around in a patch this big. We're more a series of small gardens or large gardens rather than fields. So, but this is one of the things. We do high tunnels and low tunnels. This is one of our low tunnel setups. We came up with this idea. It could be that many other people have come up with it too, so I don't claim any proprietary right to it. But it got tired of planting under your normal style of hoop, low tunnel hoop, and then having a big snow come along and crush everything because the hoops collapse. So this is basically a much stronger. It's 2x4s that are ripped into basically 1.5 by 1.5, and so we've got the ground stretcher. This is what really gives it strength. is the vertical T, and the hoop itself is just common 3/4 inch. I think it's for waterline applications. You can buy it at Lowe's or Home Depot in 100-foot coils for about 35 or 40 bucks. So we just cut this. These are about I think we're covering about 38 inches here, and the hoops are about 80 inches worth of tubing. But they're affixed to the back. We have feet, which keeps it stable. The feet or board. We run PVC stakes into the bores, and we overdo it. Sometimes we put 4 stakes in, but usually 2 stakes is enough. They're set on 48-inch centers, and then across the top we run 1/2-inch EMT. So the ridges support plastic. They support, and the hoops support the ridges, and we get really good snow protection this way. A couple of years ago we had a 38-inch snow, and not a single one of these things collapsed. The entire area here was covered with these rows, and we didn't lose anything. So they do work. They're sort of a pain to store when you're not using them, but we frequently in the summertime just leave them in place because we can always put shade cloth over them. This is a kale bed. We're going to no-till farming, and so we cover everything with a thick layer of hay, and then plant into the hay. This is scarlet kale here, and it's down in little nests. That also, the nest helps protect it from cold weather, helps protect it from wind, but it also can, in warmer weather, the hay can harbor pests, slugs, you name it, they find a place to hide. So this kind of technique isn't without its problems. But at any rate, we irrigate. We have a creek. We have 2 pumps in the creek. We pump water into these 300-gallon tanks. Then gravity feed through PVC pipes to the crops. It's sort of a well, it's homemade system for sure. It has a lot of disadvantages. The pressure going through the 1/2-inch PVC lines is not equalized. We've got 1/8-inch holes drilled in the PVC pipe about every 12 inches, but you get real strong output at the top and weaker output down at the bottom. We've tried different spacings on the holes. That doesn't really work too well either. But it does have its advantage. It's off the shelf. You can go to Lowe's and you can buy a lot of it. You can buy a little bit of it. The fittings are readily available, and they last for years. Got to be careful with the 1/2-inch shut-off valves. They like to freeze in the wintertime, and crack. So you always got to drain the system, when you're not using it. Otherwise, it works fine. We use low tunnels inside high tunnels, which I think is fairly common, but it gives you a second chance at protecting your crops. This is cauliflower, which is not going to make it because we're already in the beginning of November. We planted it late, just hoping that maybe something would come, but that's not going to happen. However, the plants are very healthy looking, and it's nice to show them off a little bit. When it does get cold, December, January, February, really cold, we always have this available. We can usually have there's a second layer of plastic that we can draw back across to cover the hoops, or we've got a row cover that we can also pull back and cover the hoops. which gives a great deal of protection in the house. We could probably keep this maybe as much as 8 or 10 degrees warmer than the outside temperature, the ambient temperature, because you got so many layers. In addition, sometimes we put hay down on the floor, and that will keep the soil at a warmer temperature. The one disadvantage of hay on the floor is that the soil doesn't warm up. It stays at a constant temperature, but it would be, in my opinion, at any rate, it's better that it stay at 40, 45 degrees than fluctuate between 50 and 35. So that I think probably the stability is it probably works to the plant's advantage. Although I don't know that for a fact. At any rate, we have these tunnels, these low tunnels, all the way down the 96-foot length of the tunnel, of the high tunnel. We have them on both sides, right up against the walls, and that also helps us with irrigation. We have less irrigation to do on the outside beds than we do on the middle beds, but because the rainwater, the snow melt, obviously, ends up along the edges, and that actually we frequently don't have to irrigate these side beds at all. There's enough groundwater, there's enough water in the soil to keep them moist. This is our high-rise low tunnel. We are farming on the second floor here. Talk about vertical agriculture. This is our attempt at vertical agriculture. What we've done in an ordinary Quonset hut high tunnel is we built platforms from one end to the other, and we're growing on the top platform as well as on the bottom of the platform. And as you can see, this is very similar to a low tunnel construction here. We're using LED lamps, modified and put inside old shop lamps, and we're planting in containers. We've got all sorts of lettuces in 4-inch pots. We don't know whether or not this is going to be completely successful. We're still trying to figure out container growing in small containers as opposed to 5-gallon buckets. But we'll, a couple of years, we'll see you again and we'll find out whether it worked.
So that was Dave Elliott with Blue Mountain Farm, and unfortunately Dave couldn't join us this evening, but he is up for any conversations with anyone that if you would like to have a conversation with Dave, just please, you can send me an email, put my email in the chat box and I will connect you with Dave. But he is an absolute wealth of knowledge, and the top tier that he calls it, platforms that he has in his high tunnels. I know that's not really fitting to low tunnels per se, but I was so impressed when I went out to record with him that I just had to have him include some of that into it. And just really, really neat setup, and even better guy. Dave is just he was amazing to spend half the day with. It was very enlightening, very knowledgeable, and any questions that anyone may have, please just reach out and we can get you in contact with Dave. So with that being said, we're going to move over to Zach if we can find Zach. Zach, are you with us, buddy?
I'm here.
There you are. Okay, man. Are you ready to go over cold crops and a little bit of planning?
Yeah. Excuse me. Let me.
And you don't have any audio in yours to butcher like I did for Dave, so.
No. So you all can see the PowerPoint
we can.
screen, I'm assuming. I can't see what I'm transmitting, so. We'll just start from the beginning. So my name is Zach Perry. I am the horticulturist with West Virginia Department of Agriculture, as well as the USDA NRCS National Resource Conservation Service, the joint employee. And today I've been asked to talk about cold weather crop production. So as you saw in the first video, Dave has a very fine variety of season extension tools. Those would come in handy with any of the crops that we're about to talk about. So kind of to give you an overview today, I'm just going to talk about the crops that do well in fall and winter, also known as the cold seasons. So there are lots of crops that are amenable to production during this time of year, fall and winter. This includes the plants harvested in fall, early winter, and also some plants that can overwinter for harvest the following spring. I broke it down into three major groups: the cole crops, brassicas, which are your broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, cauliflower, and kohlrabi. Greens, like your lettuce, kale, collards, cresses, creasy greens, spinach, and Swiss chard. And root vegetables like beets, carrots, radishes, and turnips. So I like to refer to this group of plants as brassica. It comes from the family name Brassicaceae. It's a bunch of very closely related plants. Some people call them cole crops. I've also heard them called cold crops with a D. So sometimes that gets a little muddy, but it is cole crops, C-O-L-E, or brassicas. I'll refer to them as brassicas from here on out. Like I mentioned before, this is your broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, collards, kohlrabi, and turnips. The collards, kohlrabi, and turnips are kind of handled a little bit differently, and I'll talk about them in their respective greens and root vegetable sections, but I just wanted to let you know they're in that family. These crops tolerate cold weather and are usually the first and last crops planted in a garden. So the large heading plants, which is your broccoli, cauliflower, and cabbage, they tend to grow best from transplants. And for production of transplants, you're going to be producing them, for a fall crop, anywhere from July, late June, July. It's going to take about 4 to 6 weeks from you sowing that seed to having a ready to plant transplant. Collards and turnips, on the other hand, are typically direct sown. So continuing with the larger brassicas, broccoli, cauliflower, and cabbage should be transplanted in August to September. This is a pretty big window. August, yeah, you could even go very early October if it's a mild year, but this is with transplants 100%, especially if you're going towards the end of the year. It's kind of hard to source transplants in the fall. You might see them around that August time. If you do, grab them. If not, you're just going to want to plan to grow your own. Typically during the spring and summer growing seasons, the maturity date is anywhere from 60 to 90 days. However, since we're going for the fall or winter seasons, the shortened days, less amount of light during the day can increase this, from 2 to 6, 8 weeks more. So we're looking at 75 to 120 days from transplant. Generally, when speaking about transplanted plants, tomatoes, whatever it is, we're talking about broccoli and cauliflower here, it would be 60 days from the time of transplant, not from the time of seeding. So brassicas, you want to plant with an in-row spacing of 18 to 24 inches, depending on the size of the plant. Some of the larger cabbages need the bigger spacing, up to 24 inches. Rows, generally 24 inches apart. So these guys can be transplanted, like I said, in August or September and should be ready for harvest in December or January, depending on when you plant. If you're going for a later crop, it might even be pushed into February. And like I said, this all depends on when you plant your transplants, the weather, the days to maturity of that variety. Let's say you go with like a late flat Dutch, which is already a 100-day plant. You're probably looking at February, maybe even early March, and it's going to overwinter and do fine, but it's going to take a while. And this is for all plants, not just brassicas. I stuck it in here underneath them, but plants grown in the fall typically have reduced disease and pest pressure, which can increase your quality and decrease the pest management. The colder time of years, the insect populations just aren't out there. It tends to be a lot drier, less humidity, causes less fungal problems. A lot of the diseases are going kind of senescent. They're going into their overwintering phase, and they're not actively infecting plants. So generally growing fall and winter crops, pests, disease, there's usually not that much pressure. Sometimes in a high tunnel, certainly you can run into it, or in a low tunnel, but for traditionally cropped outdoor plants, there's a great reduction in disease and pest pressure. So the next chunk I've broken it down to is greens, including our lettuces, kale, collards, cresses, which in our state would be Kacey greens, spinach, and Swiss chard. All of these guys are generally direct sown in August through September, even like I said, into early October for harvest in November, December. Swiss chard, kale, maybe even collards, you can plant into October, but it's going to be a later harvest, like I said, more into February. So additionally, the lettuce, kale, collards, and Swiss chard benefit from being grown as a transplant, and production from seed to transplant typically takes 4 to 6 weeks. This saves a lot of time thinning plants later in the season. Any of your direct sown plants, you're going to overseed, and you're going to have to, thin them out to get the desired spacing so the plants can grow to full mature size. So that being said, considerations for direct sowing your greens. Can the plants be harvested young? So, if you're planting lettuce or spinach or arugula, something like that you can eat while it's small, you might want to think about planting them more dense as you go along your rows. Once they get to, second, third, even fourth leaf stage, you can go out, harvest a mess, maybe do that a couple times until you reach your final spacing that you want for that plant so it can grow to maturity. Direct sowing seeds should be performed by making a shallow furrow with a garden tool and placing the seed down the row. Do not be afraid of overseeding. Like I said, you're going to end up thinning them anyway. So more is better than less, especially, in the fall, rain can be kind of patchy, or you might get a clump somewhere and not somewhere else, and you want a nice even stand. As I mentioned, you're gonna have to thin these because of the high population of plants from your direct sowing from the initial seeding event. So thinning greens. Once the plants have grown 1 to 3 inches, which is that 2 to 3, maybe even 4, true leaf stage. I say true leaf stage. So when the plant first comes up, the first 2 leaves for all dicots, which is we're not going to go into grasses. I'm not going to go in botany brain right now, but so they're going to have 2 cotyledons or seed leaves that come up. So once there's 2 or 3 true leaves, which are the ones that aren't those seed leaves or cotyledons, that's about the right time to start thinning to increase the space between the plants. They should ultimately be spaced using some of the guidelines below. For lettuces, heading varieties, as I said, you can have multiple thinning events. So you're starting with small lettuces, you're getting some leaf lettuce, small salads, whatever. And then ultimately for the heading varieties, you want to end up with about 10 to 12 inches between plants in row. For leafing varieties, you're going to want to shoot for 4 to 8 inches, depending on the type. Kale, you want to go 8 to 12 inches between plants in row for the ultimate spacing. Collards, 10 to 12 inches. Kacey greens, 3 to 4. They're not too big of guys. Spinach, same thing, 3 to 5. And Swiss chard, 4 to 6. And that's variable. It depends on how big you want to get them and what stage you're going to harvest them. But these are some general guidelines for how far apart your plant should ultimately be spaced after you direct seed them. So on to our next subgenre is root crops. Several root crops do well during the fall and winter. This includes beets, carrots, radishes, and turnips. Kohlrabi also does well during this time of year. However, it is not a root crop. I had to throw that in there. People might refer to it as the root of the kohlrabi, but technically it's the hypocotyl. It's more like an onion. It grows on top of the ground. It's not a root itself, so it's not growing under the ground. Just a little fun fact. Anyway, it also does well during this time of year, but all root crops do great direct sown and then to the appropriate spacing, as with greens. Like the other fellows, fall winter crops, the planting window is from September to early October. Direct sowing of the seeds of root crops is the most practical way to get them started. Root crops do not like to be transplanted. I can't think of one that does. You might be able to transplant kohlrabi. Everything else, you're going to have a bad time. So like with greens, you're going to make a shallow furrow down the length of the row. It should be pretty straight and uniform. Plants need to be sown very shallowly, and this goes for the greens too, 1/4 to a 1/2 inch deep, no more. Generally, they're very, very small seeds, especially carrot seeds are super small. Kale seeds, a little bit bigger. Turnip seeds, small. Radish seeds, small. All these guys have really small seeds. And I like to do 2 to 4 times. So the size of the seed depends on how deep you plant it. You know, double or quadruple how wide the seed is, and that's how far it needs to be buried or covered up. So between row spacing, generally 12 to 18 inches apart. In row spacing, for beets, 3 to 4 inches. Carrots, 1 to 2 inches. Turnips, 2 to 4 inches. Radishes, you can get away with, 3/4 to an inch between plants. And with kohlrabi, it's going to be 4 to 6 inches between each plant. So crop planting. This may have been better off at the beginning, but I kind of wanted to go over all the crops that could be successful during this time of year. To me, planting is the key to success of your garden. Despite the season, despite your size, your scale, if you're market driven, whether you're producing for yourself, planting is the key. If you're starting your own seeds, you have to take into consideration when the plants will be finished and removed from the garden and have the seed or transplants available at the correct time to plant the cold crop. So, you can get to August and say, hey, man, I really want to plant some fall cabbage. And you go and look for transplants and there are none. But a way to prevent this is to plan ahead. Make a note. Say, okay, I'm going to either start my plants or source my transplants early and kind of be constantly thinking ahead. Be 2-3 months ahead in your mind, thinking what's the next step? What's going to go here? These guys should be finished in half July. I'm going to take them out. That'll take a week and get me in the first week of August. I can put these guys in and they'll be finished by September, and then I can go back in. You need to have a plan. And there's lots of things to take into consideration. The type of plant, the days to maturity. If it's a plant that has an extended harvest window, like a tomato or something, versus a cut and done, like a cabbage or lettuce. And kind of what your market or your personal goals are for production. So those are just some things to think about. But planning, I think, is the key. And having a clear plan of what to plant can greatly increase your production and allow you to always stay a step ahead. I've designed this chart. I can distribute it to Nathan and Lacey and whoever to get to whoever would like it. This showed up nice and orange on PowerPoint. It is just a Word document. But on here, I've listed, this includes both cold crops and normal crops, but it has the spring and fall planting dates, the amount of weeks to start the seeds before transplanting, and days to maturity from transplant. As I said, this row over here, can you see my cursor, guys, on this? Bueller?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't know which screen. So the days of maturity, like I said, it's going to change with the season. You might add anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks for fall production. So this column here, weeks to start seeds before transplanting. You know, some things direct sow: beets, carrots, garlic, radishes. They're direct sown, so that's what I've indicated here. Cabbage, like I said, 4 to 6 weeks. So if you want to go and plant the second week of August, your cabbage transplants, you're going to need to sow the first week of July, let's say. So these are things to think about, especially if you're starting seed for your garden. So like I said, this is available. It has a lot of information on it. If you need any help decoding, I am always here to ask questions, and I'll provide my contact information after this little talk. This is just a tool that I've developed. It helps me put a lot of information in one spot and hopefully answer a lot of questions just with one document. So the last thing I'm going to touch on, as a cold crop, which is cover crops are not a de facto cold crop. You can have certainly a spring, summer, fall, or winter cover crop. I'm touching on cover crops for this reason. Generally, I've noticed throughout Appalachia, you know, end of season comes, pull up all the plants, turn them under, and kind of leave the field go fallow. That is the worst thing you can do for your soil health. You need to have something actively growing, be it weeds, you know, whatever blows in, preferably something that is beneficial, such as a cover crop. So if you don't think that you're going to plant any of the above mentioned plants, or if you're only going to plant, you know, a third or a fourth of the garden in cabbage and lettuce and all that great stuff, the other portion can really benefit from a cover crop. So they're a great way to improve soil health and quality by providing ground cover during the cold seasons. Depending on the type of cover crops you get, you can have benefits ranging from, you know, moisture control, increasing the amount of micropores, which helps the tilth or the texture. You can nitrify the soil by using a legume like a vetch, a clover, or a field pea. Grasses. Some grasses have really deep roots, go really far down, bring nutrition up from below that plow pan, and can help break up the soil matter. And so after, you know, spring comes, you're ready to plant your garden, you just go out and terminate these guys, generally right at flowering, which is about exactly the same time you're going to be planting your crops anyway. That's when they have the most nutrition available. You're going to go out and you can stretch a tarp over them and smother them. You can spray herbicides. You can cut them down or use other mechanical means, anything ranging from a scythe to a weed eater to a lawnmower, tractor, roller, crimper, insert implement here. You're just going to want to cut them down and then incorporate them into the soil, be it a no-till method where you're planting directly into the residues, traditional rototillers, disking, harrowing, whatever type of tillage method that you choose. And that, so not only did you help protect your soil for the cold months, but you're now adding a lot of great organic matter to your soil, which really helps improve the quality. The more organic matter you get, pretty much the better. To a point, you can get too much organic matter, but I highly doubt any of us will ever reach that. So yeah, that's my little spiel on cover crops. If you want suggestions on anything, you can get a hold of me. I like a mix, something with a legume and a grass. As I said, the legumes can fix atmospheric nitrogen, so take nitrogen from the atmosphere, put it into the ground so it's available for your plants. Grasses establish really fast and can have some deep roots, and usually combination of the two is kind of a win-win in my book. Some of the grasses will winter kill, and then something like a hairy vetch will grow maybe 6-8 inches during the fall, and then spring it starts to warm up. February, March, it really takes off, and it uses that dead grass as a trellis to let itself get higher up and get more light and become more nutritious, and therefore increasing the soil health. That is pretty much all that I have right now. I will flash the two entities for which I am employed, NRCS and Department of Agriculture. And if there's any questions, let me know. If not, I'm going to stop the screen. Okay, what's up?
If I want to focus on early and late season crops and would still like to do a cover crop, do you have a summer cover crop recommendation?
I do. Do you? So let's see. When you say summer, what early, late, and how long do you want it to be in the ground for?
I want to let my beds rest in July and August, and I guess maybe early September, ideally, so that I'm focused on mid-season planting.
So
in September.
The two plants that come to mind are buckwheat and sun hemp. Buckwheat grows extremely fast. If you have any other crops in the nearby area, they will love the buckwheat because bees love buckwheat. All kinds of pollinators flock to the buckwheat. The thing with the buckwheat you have to watch, though, is it can become a weed if you do let it go to flower and produce seed. You're going to have to terminate it before it gets to seed production, or else it'll be kind of weedy. Another plant that you could use would be the sun hemp. I think either one of those would do, but I would go for probably the buckwheat, just because it establishes so quickly and it gets a really thick stand, outcompetes any of the other weeds that might be blown in there. The seeds are fairly large, so therefore they have large seedlings. Large seedlings, they take off faster and can cover the area quite well.
Can I have a follow-up question on sun hemp?
Yes.
Would it cause a weed problem? A class I took, they mentioned that sun hemp could be used for cut flower, so it could actually be a little income boost during that cover crop time. Would I have to worry about sun hemp being something that would be a major weed issue?
I think sun hemp, I'm not too familiar with sun hemp as I am with
it's really pretty.
Yeah, so it's a fast growing, it's pretty much in the same bucket as buckwheat.
Okay.
Anyway, it grows fast and outcompetes any of the weeds, and it's going to shade them out. As far as cut flower production from sun hemp, I am unsure, to be honest with you.
I think it might be a nice supplement, but I just don't want to make sure. I wanted to make sure I wasn't going to make a weed nightmare for myself by letting it go to flower.
Yeah, and even if you do let it go to flower for cut flower production, if you're cutting those flowers when they're still flowers, that's fine. It's just,
yeah, but we would never get them all, and I don't think I would have a market for that many cover crop flowers, you know?
Right. I mean, you could do some, certainly, harvest some, and then the rest just kind of say thank you and then chop them up.
There's a good suggestion. Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else, or anything you want me to go back over?
Yeah, since we're talking cover crops, can you hear me? This is Lacey.
Yep.
What about sowing oats as a cover crop? When would be the optimal time? Would it be more of an early season or a late season, or do you think that it matters?
Oats, so you're just using them as a cover crop. You're not trying to reap the grains, or you are?
Not necessarily, but it wouldn't be a bad thing. More so for the milky oat, like the early oat, that would be more interested in than the late, like, hard, dry kernel.
Right. So if you want to, I would say it'd be better off as an earlier planted. If you want to cut it at the boot stage, which is where the milky kernels are, I would plant a little bit earlier. If you plant it later into the fall, it's probably just going to winter kill before it ever really flowers. It might flower, but oats can be kind of sensitive as compared to some of your winter rye and winter barley or anything that says winter in front of it and is a grass. The garden calendar, so the one that I showed there is for outdoors. I have both a version for outdoor planting and for high tunnels. Yep, no problem. Like I said, I will email that out, I guess, to the group, and we can disperse it to whoever needs it or wants it. Or even maybe attach it supplementally somehow whenever this gets uploaded.
We could do that. We'll definitely add it to it on our website.
Yeah, we can post it to the posting on YouTube. But Denise, if you want to put your email address in there, we can certainly send it to you. So Zach, if I'm like a lot of people and I miss that window to get my cold crops in, at what point does it become detrimental to, okay, I'm late, I know I'm late, should I still put that in the ground, or would I be better off going to a cover crop and growing that throughout the winter to improve soil health for coming spring?
I guess it depends on your situation. You know, if you're market driven, you're like, oh crap, I have to have this, I would still put them out. But if you're just growing for yourself and it's late in the season, just do a cover crop. And even with the cover crop, it's not set in stone when you want to plant it. You can do it, you know, up to half September. So September 15th is generally my cutoff for, you know, most of the state. You could even do it up to October, especially if you're using like a winter wheat or something like that. But anything later than that, don't be surprised if you have less than excellent results. But still go for it. I think cover crop seed is, depending on what you get, I mean, it's super cheap, especially the rye and stuff. It's like, I don't even know, 10 pounds would be like $3.
Thank you.
Which would do like 5,000 feet probably, or more square feet.
Does anybody else have any questions for Zach before we wrap tonight up? Okay. Well, thank you, Zach. That has been extremely helpful and highly informative. So greatly appreciate it. And even though Dave wasn't able to join us this evening, unfortunately, very pleased that he took the time out to help us out on this as well. So really looking forward to having more further conversations with him as well. So with that being said, I believe our next date for our next series episode is November 17th, where we will have, correct me if I'm wrong here, we've got Seth Lucas and Tootie Jones on tap for meat production and processing. Is that correct, guys? Somebody back me on that one, but I believe that's right.
Yes.
Yeah, you're right.
Very good. Thank you. So I hope you guys will join us for that one as well. And thank you again to Zach and Dave for taking the time out to join us this evening. So thank you all and have a nice evening.
Thanks. Have a good one, guys.
Thanks, Zach.